Welcome to the Friendly Aussie podcast.
Hello.
Hi there. How's it going?
Welcome to the Friendly Aussie podcast.
Yeah, hello everybody. We're here with Nathan today from the Magical Butter Company. How are you doing, Nathan?
Guys, good. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, it was a bit of a last minute thing, but we got here and it was almost like a sign from God. Like, you messaged me when I was just thinking, fuck, we need a podcast guest. Like, and you messaged me, you added me on Facebook, and I'm like, I know what to do here.
Divine grace.
And then you're like, I'm in Brisbane. And I'm like, well that's
make it happen. Yeah. Very
Yeah,
good.
last minute. You're about to fly off, go do some important work.
Yeah, or back home. We'll come down to do some important work down here. So it's tying up a few things and moving a few things around to make our business a little bit more streamlined, more than anything else. And yeah, but flying back home to my beautiful wife and kids.
Wonderful.
So it should be fun.
Lovely.
That's a good time.
Nice stuff.
Let's get a little bit of like your story. Like, how did you get involved with cannabis, and like, how did that all come about for you?
Yeah, I've probably been involved, or my wife and I have been involved in the industry itself for close to a little over 5 years now, I guess, and it's really after the US sort of started taking mainstream effect, I guess, more than anything else, is where we sort of joined along, and yeah, but obviously we've got the Magical Butter machine, and we own and represent the brand down here with in conjunction with the guys in the US.
Cool.
And how did you guys form that relationship with the guys in the US?
Well, it's interesting how it sort of turned about. I'd have to take you back to how the machine was invented, I guess, first, and that was by a guy called Garen Angel, which is the business partner I'm with here in Australia, more predominantly, and he's in Florida. In 2000 and I think it was 2013 or thereabouts, he had a friend of his who has Crohn's disease and also bad asthma. But he wanted to be able to relieve his pain naturally, etc., and didn't want to go down the pharmaceutical route, and couldn't smoke or vape to help out with that sort of side of things. So Garen turned around and said, well, hang on, there's got to be an easy way that we can make edibles for you. That's going to be a good streaming way to get it done, etc., etc. And yeah, he put his mind to it, and the Magical Butter machine was eventually born.
That's fantastic.
How many years of development did the machine take?
I'm not sure exactly how many years itself, but it was definitely tried and tested for quite extensively for a number of months, if not years, before it actually launched to the market. So I'm not sure on the dates on that side, but I know 2013 is when Magical Butter itself in the States launched.
Yep.
In 2015, we launched here with that. So how that sort of come about, Amanda, my wife, actually coincidentally has a disease called ulcerative colitis, which is very similar to Crohn's disease.
Yeah, right.
And she was in a similar situation. She does like to consume, but we wanted to find a more healthier alternative to that to happen. And we owned some retail shops at that stage. I won't say the brand, but we used to own some retail shops. And yeah, so we did some research, and we ended up finding the machine itself. And a few meetings later and a few phone calls later, I was shaking hands with the guys in Florida down in the States. So it was a very, very quick turnaround from nothing at all to having something come through, and yeah, so we had to it was a bit to go along there. They only developed a 110 volt machine at that stage, so we had to help them reinvent the wheel and help them create a 240 volt machine and do some testing around that side of things. And yeah, so from that we were born essentially, and
it's really exciting being at the center of that.
Well, the most exciting thing about it all is that we used the machine, we created a medicine, we sourced some herb material off our own bat and all that sort of stuff, and it wasn't the best quality, and this is 5 years ago now, so we all know how far the industry's gone in 5 years.
Dramatically.
So 5 years ago we didn't have access to the quality of herb material that we have now, and into that respect we didn't have access to the high grade alcohol that we need as well.
Quite right.
But we did our best, and we ended up finding some slightly above average herb material that we could utilize, and we found some organic ethanol that we ended up using, and we ended up putting Amanda's ulcerative colitis in remission within 6 weeks.
Wow.
And that was
amazing.
that was through high potent, more than a gram a day of oil as suppository. and it had an astounding effect. The nurses and so forth who perform the procedures to the colonoscopies to see the effects that it has, the disease has on the lower colon up through the lower intestine was, originally there was an ulcer, once every half centimetre, which is incredibly painful, as you could imagine. Then, within, doing just one capsule a day as a suppository, she was able to put it in remission within, about 6 weeks. And the nurse who did the follow-up colonoscopies, because we live in a fairly, country area, so we don't have access to specialists for diseases like that. So we have to get things done by nurses, and they send the results down to doctors, etc. And the nurse said that without reading a chart, she would have never known that she had ulcerative colitis at that stage. So literally there was only a handful of ulcers right at the top of her lower intestine, compared to having an ulcer every half centimetre all the way through.
So before Magical Butter, or this product, came to Australia and before it existed, what options were out there for people, living in regional areas, especially when it came to, treating with cannabis?
There are no options. That's the thing. It's sourcing material, which is incredibly difficult for a lot of people, and that's always been the hold up. So that their option is obviously to break the law. There are doctors coming through now who have offering prescriptions and so forth, but as we discussed earlier, it's frightfully expensive for 90% of the community, and hopefully we can get them on a PBS scheme or get some subsidies for those people who really do need it for a medical reason.
That's it. So just to be clear, before this product existed, there wasn't really an easy way to make these high quality butters.
There's many ways to skin a cat. As we know, there are obviously the old-fashioned ways of using the crock pot and all that sort of stuff.
That was how I did it for years.
Yeah, and I did it on the stovetop and all sort of stuff, and did the simmer for 8 or 10 hours to slowly decarboxylate the herb. But that was before we figured out that, hang on, we can do these things prior, like decarboxylation, to our chosen cannabinoid. So not only THC, if we want CBD, if we've got high CBD material, or if we want CBN or from THC, we can definitely get that. It's just harder to get from that point, but we're able to get it compared to 5 years ago. That you wouldn't even know. I didn't know what CBN or CBG or even CBD was.
Sure. So you're refining that process, getting more knowledgeable.
Well, we're refining our knowledge to get more thing, but we're applying that knowledge to our processes to make it more simplistic for everyone.
Yeah. You've just got the temperature settings, so it's you're going to get this extract at this temp.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that's done in the decarboxylation process beforehand. So the machine will give you consistency after that point, and that's pretty well what the machine does essentially. It will give you consistency and knowing that you're going to get the same product every single time, providing that you're using the same product every single time to put in the machine. And that's a big thing. If you are dedicated to a CBD product and you need CBD and you can extract CBD using our methods and our machine to get that done, then you're going to consistently do that to make it better.
The real benefit I found with the Magical Butter machine, to be honest, is the discreetness. It holds the smell in much more than if I was to do it on a crock top or something, and it's
correct.
That's so helpful.
Yeah, well, we actually sell a lot to unit blocks and developments for that purpose. You can have it in your apartment building, and you're not going to annoy anyone 4 or 5 stories above. It's the same with houses. In Brisbane here, houses are incredibly close. Incredibly close. There's meters within houses compared to us in the country.
Our backyard's been subdivided.
It's crazy. I'll have to. Well, actually, when we're out there was no space whatsoever. So to have a device that has a heavy odor reduction does help considerably, and again, it brings you that consistency. You can set it there. You can, not have to stand there and stir. You don't have to stand there and do anything. And the machine's going to do the work for you.
It's the Thermomix of the cannabis space.
It is. We don't like to mention other brands, but definitely that side of things, it is to that degree, and we're a tenth of the price. We don't have all the bells and whistles, but then again, you don't want to use a thermo for your things. So if you're feeding the rest of your family, or if you've got kids or anything like that, or you you got grandparents or parents that you don't want to have any residual side effect of psychoactive effects that could come through, you use our machine. Like it's using other brands in that space. Like our point or major point of difference is that we blend from the top.
Yeah,
right?
cool.
Whereas if you blend
go from the
stuff
bottom.
and you're trying to extract oil or bud or anything out of the increment little bits in the bottom of that blender is incredibly difficult. Whereas ours, you just lift it out, wipe it off, and you're good. Where you literally have to take apart those other major brands that are out there.
Yeah, no, there's nothing quite like the magical butter machine on the market that I've seen.
There isn't, and not, and I guess we are more tailored to this specific industry from that point. Like there are other things out there, but we have there are like-for-like competitors to a degree, but we do have, not again, obviously that odor control, but a much heavier duty motor and a better heating element and so forth from that perspective. And the overall product itself is a lot more sturdy.
Yeah, it feels very good. Like when you click that lid on, it feels secure.
It's there.
Know, it's that old. If it feels heavy, it's probably quality.
Yeah,
you get that with the magical butter machine for sure.
Yeah, it's and we're always redeveloping as well. Like the same machine, yes, it is the MB2E, but that said, it's evolved so many times in the last 5 years, and it's little increment changes what makes it today, and we're still evolving. There's a lot of stuff in the pipeline, and we're hoping to release a whole raft of new different devices and products next year that will help this sort of same process. So I can't say too much about that, but yeah, it's going to be it's going to be an exciting time for when it does happen, for sure.
That's really exciting.
What I really love to see is just the rise of, I guess butter and oil as a kind of publicly and mass accepted and adopted thing. Like there's so many people who are now cooking with cannabis and infusing it and using it in ways that it just wasn't really all that prominent before.
We find that obviously it is more healthy to consume cannabis via eating it compared to smoking or even vaping or through a water pipe or something similar from that point. And that's sort of what we drive home, and it's adding in healthier recipes on top of that. Like don't get me wrong, gummy bears are great, but they're full of sugar. But to that point you can go to the refined point of just having things in capsules for easy consumption, whether it's just a heavy coconut oil infusion or it's there's so many other healthier benefits and go for it. And just on that too, butter is great, we love butter, but coconut oil is so much healthier.
Honestly, I prefer the extract with coconut oil 10 times over the butter.
Oh, for sure.
Like the thing I found with butter versus coconut oil, the biggest thing is coconut oil, I put in a litre, I get back pretty much a litre. Butter, I lose 20-30%.
Well, that's the water content. If you clarified your butter beforehand, you're going to lose
it's just
less.
Even mentally, just frustrating,
It is, but then think of it as more of a concentration matter. It's you use less.
In our household, we occasionally, because we have like a nice little jar of coconut oil, we'll just take a spoonful and cook our curry with it, and we're good.
It's and surprisingly, it does extremely well in a lot of those sort of cases. So we get the same thing. Obviously, we got kids, so we do all, our infusion separate, or Amanda just does her medicine separately for what she needs, of course. But yeah, it's but one of the things that I find the best thing about it is that it's so much more discreet. Like I do a lot of traveling. I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of different countries since we began this journey, and fortunately I've had the edibles with me almost the whole journey, and I've never had any major issues, which is great. So I was able to self-medicate in airports or on planes or whatever, and not distract the person sitting next to me, or it's a really good easy way to self-medicate without any issues.
Where's the best place that you've eaten or consumed edibles in your travels?
Honestly, the best place I've eaten, it's hard to say for those sort of things. We have some really good chefs here in Australia. We really, really do. With coaching, initial coaching to show them how to cook with cannabis, they normally take that bull by the horns and do exceptional things with it. So I could probably name 2 or 3 ones that I'd happily sit down at dinner with at any time. In the States, it's a similar story. Like we used to have a full-time chef with Magical Butter, who's since moved, and he's got his own brand out there now, making edibles and putting edibles into dispensaries and so forth. But he launched his own brand initially off the back of Magical Butter. butter. And so, yeah, it's all good for it. You know, he's doing phenomenal well. So, and he's cooked some phenomenal meals. So some really, really good meals. But yeah, also the chefs in here in Australia are exceptional as well. So eating cannabis, it's difficult because we do consume so much from that point. It's we need a lot to have that effect. And what generally does myself and probably you guys would put most general consumers to sleep, and that's not essentially, or give them a bad time with edibles, and that's not what we're pushing for. So it's hard to say, and I guess the best chefs that we've used can have the ability to remove the taste completely.
Sure.
There are many methods to do that, whether it's washing or whatever to get the chlorophyll out. But essentially, you can get heavily medicated without the taste. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, some people love the taste. A lot of people don't like the taste.
Yep.
And this, and the right chefs can really get that done. So it's just extracting the molecules more than the flavor.
Yeah, and the way that they can, hone in on the precision of dosage as well on certain meals, that's quite interesting to me.
That's simple math.
Yeah.
Realistically, like if and a lot of those sort of guys, though, instead of infusing the core meal, they're adding infusion on top of the meal.
Right.
Like that could be drops of CBD in a sauce or whatever. We create the meal with it in it, so it's not an additive, and that can make it a little bit more difficult to get a proper idea of how much exactly is in each exact portion, but you can get a very broad sense of it. So if you have 15 meals, for instance, and you're using, an ounce or 2 ounces or 3 ounces or whatever, and you know the variety or the strain, and you know that it's got you can get approximate amount of the milligram rate per gram on each, for the herb itself that you're using. Then obviously adapt that to the meal itself, and it really depends on how much the person uses the sauce that's infused compared to the person that doesn't. That sort of things can be quite difficult to calculate, and that's sort of why we enjoy doing big grand meals that way, because everyone's having a good time, and sometimes you don't know which meal is the really potent sort of part or whatever it might be, but obviously we only when we do those sort of things, we only cater to people who are very, very vast and experienced in consuming.
That makes sense.
Because we don't want the general public or people coming in and trying these sorts of things and doing themselves damage or
tolerance is real.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100% real. And we've made the mistake of in the past of giving small amounts of edibles to people who probably shouldn't have received it, or they didn't have a good time. They're obviously okay and safe and sound, of course, but during the process of them,
a little bit too intense.
Yeah, it can be. It's especially if you're not expecting it, like. Obviously, you never give an edible to anyone who, you're not drugging anyone, quote unquote. So you never give an edible to anyone and say, hey, it's not an edible or anything like that. So you definitely pre-warn people. But I'm
glad we have that ethical statement from the magical.
Oh, of course, definitely. People. But that said, though,
it's crazy people who think they can just drug someone and get away with it. That's so not okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. And like we would only, again, we don't sell anything like that by all means. Let's put that on record for sure. And but that said, it's we always recommend, hey, take it slow, take a nibble, take a bite, see how you go, and unfortunately some people are obnoxious, and they think, oh, I can take 40 milligrams or I can take 50 milligrams, and they haven't consumed before, and all of a sudden they're not having a fun and safe time as what they expected.
It's the classic story of consuming way more than you probably should because of the longer onset of consumed cannabis, oral cannabis.
We find that from that it's all down to your metabolism to that. So someone who's quite skinny would have the ability to within about 45 minutes to start feeling that effect. Someone a bit bigger, it would be over an hour.
Sure.
From that sort of thing, and that's some of the risks that you take. Like I know some people, it could be an hour and a half, 2 hours before they feel the effects.
That's right. Yeah.
And when you get to that stage, you run the risk of an hour later, okay, I didn't feel anything, I better take a little bit more. Well,
the other problem is, edibles are just often tasty.
They can be
and
too.
Then people are like, well, I just want to have like another piece because it tastes so good.
Binge, yeah.
And then it could be like, oh, maybe one more. And like, that's where I see like that overdose. And what I've always told people when they're like, oh, I'm going to make my own edibles. And like, I know they're a lightweight. It's like, use half the amount of oil and just substitute the other oil, like for plain oil, and you'll have a much better time.
Yeah, little bits are good. One of the very, very first things that we ever made 5 years ago was Anzac Bickies, and I made a series of Anzac Bickies for my mother. My mum has a rheumatoid arthritis, and she wanted, she's a consumer, and she wanted to try an edible and so forth, and we made 12 cookies, 12 big Anzac cookies, and I'm displaying with my hands, but probably the size or the diameter of a football, like a small AFL football or something similar. But basically, I said, hey, these quite potent from what we can see. I want you to cut them up into quarters, and then you can just take one and nibble on it and see how you go, etc., etc. And my mother, being mother, she said, no, if you, Nathan, I can take this sort of thing, and took the whole cookie in one go. And she's a small lady, she's a cranky lady, but she's a small lady, and basically she was couch locked for 2 days.
Wow.
So she was pain free but couldn't move.
Yeah.
So that's an unfortunate side effect.
It can be, and she didn't have the experience with it, and she didn't take the advice that we sort of gave out, and so hey, this is but from that though, she's got a machine and she makes her own now, and now she makes her own balms and all that sort of stuff. And we learnt how to do balms over those years. After that point, then now she's she's doing topicals and so forth instead of direct consuming, which has the same results. She's not getting high, or she's not getting the psychoactive effects from it, but she's getting the much needed pain relief that's needed, and that's simply by rubbing an oil on her hand or on her knee or on her foot, wherever she's got the pain for the day.
The balms, how easy are they to put together from the machine?
Very easy. It's all on a coconut oil base, to be honest.
Cool.
So if you can create the MCT or coconut oil, you're halfway there to creating a balm.
That's awesome.
So there are a lot of recipes on our YouTube channel and on our website, so I'd recommend people to go to if they want those extra things to go down. It's all in detail and all done by qualified chefs from
We'll
around
link
the world.
it in the description, I guess.
Sorry?
We'll link it if you have it on.
Yeah, I can send you something for sure. That won't be an issue at all.
No, I've been trying to get my mum to try a little bit of oil, and she just won't do it. She's quite ethnic, so we're Croatian background, and devil's lettuce thinks she's going to see pink elephants type shit. And she's very interested in it. She's taking CBD. She's been doing that for a bit. But she's just worried about the freak out and stuff, and she's like, I need someone to be here and watch me with it, and da-da-da-da-da-da. But even then, she's just like, no. And it's it's this slow transition, but she hasn't had a comfortable night's sleep, I think, in years.
Yeah.
So do you think that's down to the propaganda that she was probably fed back in the 70s and 80s?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people who are affected pretty heavily by it.
My dad as well. My dad's someone who would benefit from cannabis wholeheartedly, but he's got that mentality of
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs, fucking. It's not good for you. He refers to it as, why you smoke shit? You don't need it.
Yeah. You just got to explain the quality that you're smoking. It's not shit, Dad. It's quite good.
It is the shit.
It is the shit. It is fire. So yeah, it's and that's that's that generation that this generation that we're in, or the ones below, are going to be affected by. And as unfortunate as it is, they're refusing to listen to the education that's been put in front of them.
I think they're getting there. I really, really, really think they're getting there. The more, I think, that little CBD that's come through, and now everyone's like, oh, what's CBD? Oh,
Even medicinal cannabis, you were saying, maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 people are
probably
in favor.
approving. They approve of medicinal cannabis because they've seen the epilepsy results and things like that, and it's too hard to go, nah, it's not all right to have.
There might be some Bible bashers out there.
But for the most part, very few people are now against the medical side of cannabis, but they don't understand the full spectrum of what the medical side does.
Yeah, and the, as we said before, the incredible expense of going through the medical route is and that's sort of the acceptance of cannabis here in Australia as it moves forward is just going to breathe more into the illegal market at the moment. So again,
I really do think the medical market is catching up, though.
I believe so, and I think
really is in the last 3 months. I know so many more people jumping on the scheme.
Yeah, and I think that's going to help bring in better quality herb to go along with that.
It's like a big union.
Yeah, well, I did see some of the herb coming through initially that was developed, and it was definitely subpar, and that sort of thing did push a lot of people back to that illegal market because the home growing boutique grower can push out some exceptionally good quality cannabis.
That's right. And the barriers to entry to the legal scheme are just insane.
That's right. And I'm sure it's all those people only doing 2 plants in Canberra that are pushing this quality bud out. But even then, it's you're going to get, in those early stages, you're definitely going to be getting a much better material. Now, things are changing, and the growers that the government or the pharmacies have employed have started to work a bit harder, and we have noticed some better flour coming through and better concentrates and so
the
forth.
price is coming down as well. That's the big one.
Well, that's the concentration level in the market. Like as you said, like if more people are coming on board and doing medical and getting a medical certificate and buying ounces or buying 10 grams at a time or buying vapes to help or whatever it might be, it is going to help dramatically reduce the cost of the development because they're going to be producing more. Like the farms are going to get bigger, the quality is going to get better, you would hope, and hopefully you can pursue the right avenues. But if they could flip the coin and give the person who's affected the rights to do it at home on their own, that would change the concept quite dramatically.
Completely.
Don't get me wrong, it's like a home brew system. People enjoy alcohol. Not hundreds of people aren't rushing out for a home brew system to make incredibly strong alcohol. It's going to be the same with cannabis here in Australia. It's difficult to get to that now medical grade of quality herb. People can do it at home,
Completely.
but it's
a lot of work.
It is a lot of work and a lot of attention, and to that, getting the right strains to get the right thing for your illness, whether it's a high CBD strain to help with CBD specifically, or if it's a high THC strain for THC-related elements that you can be relieved with. You can move forward with it. So if we did go down that line, I think it would be considerably better for everyone trying to access. And don't get me wrong. You're still going to get the massive amount of portion going to people to get medical because they're going to realize A, it's very, very difficult to produce the product to their specifications, but B, if they only need a little bit, or if they only need, like, if they don't need the rock hard 30% fucking, real strong shit, then you can, produce a simple 12% type of plant at home quite comfortably that will help out 90% or 80% of illnesses that can be cannabis related be solved.
There's something about the rise of medicinal cannabis clinics, even the one that's just down the road, and the accessibility of it. It's become, I think, an inevitability that kind of like home grow scenario is a reality within the next 5 to 10 years. There's only so long that you can prevent that from happening.
You might actually end up getting vertical integration out of some of these sort of places. Like if the smaller pharmacy, for instance, and when I say pharmacy, the qualified pharmacist and all that sort of stuff, happen to be a grower, and they were able to produce their own medical cannabis through their own facility.
Right. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, why the hell wouldn't they?
Probably just the barriers for the TGA approval.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
So that in itself, though, like in the States, everything's tested.
Yeah.
You send a portion of your product away to get tested. There's early on there was some states that you had plants specifically for patients that was grown specifically for that patient. Then it would be sent away for testing. Then it would come back and you have the full analysis of what that plant has and does, and you have a spectrum between 2 and 3% milligram rates of what it could be pushed out at. So you've got some sort of consistency. Then once that's developed, that's what it's marketed as.
Right.
That's what gets printed on the bottle, because that's specifically what it is. Now, yes, you would have to do that every grow. Yes, you would have to do that with every plant, essentially, or thereabouts, providing, unless you've got clones and you can get that consistency down and show the consistency with tree strains, and
you might almost need to create a genetic stability before you put it onto.
You would expect that, and that's probably one of the things that they would require if it was to come ahead. But then again, you have full integrated opportunities in the States as it is.
That's true.
And
they've actually gotten rid of a lot of the red tape and bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've got a medical certificate, if you've got a medical card in the States, you can buy from their integrated grow that's been completely vetted by the FDA, or the government that handles all those sort of things in the States. And all of a sudden you've got your medical grade cannabis produced from an integrated grow that's done on the one site.
Right.
It just makes sense. Not only would you get better work or better cannabis because it's done by a boutique grower that's knowing their product and knowing their stuff, it's not coming from a massive facility, as we're talking about today. That your facility that you're having to tour was one of the ones with the biggest, most amount of plants in the world, or that you've seen. It's hey, that's fantastic. It's a big grow. But it won't compare to the boutique grower that has 10 plants.
Yep.
True.
They're always going to push out the better quality herb. And if that was a pharmacist that was doing it and it was legitimate and you had those testings legitimately done, it would make access not only immediate for a lot of, it would cut through a lot of that red tape.
If the TGA wasn't in the way, basically,
Well,
if there was some other agency or mediator that wasn't as harsh or difficult to deal with.
The TGA is governed by pharmaceutical companies.
That's quite right. That's the problem.
That is 100% the problem. They don't want that out there because of that. And that's why that all these sort of roadblocks are getting brought up. Like the recent, I think it was 30 milligrams for one dose per day is what they're looking at for over-the-counter medicine.
I think it was
for CBD.
30 or 60 maybe.
No, I'm pretty confident it was 30. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident it was 30. That said, even 60 milligrams is not enough to do anything for one dose
true, actually,
over a day. You need a concentrated level for that. Like we Magical Butter, we sell a 3,000 milligram 60 mil tincture in the States. 3,000 milligrams. Whereas what we're looking at here is 30 milligrams in 60 milliliters.
Yeah, you got to guzzle that whole bottle.
Yeah, to get literally 1% of the other. It's incredible. And the thing is, though, CBD is incredibly inexpensive over there. Incredibly inexpensive. So the markets are getting flooded with pretty good quality CBD.
And if you have mediocre CBD, you're probably not going to compete very well. Right?
No, that's right. And unfortunately, the dosage, well, it's the molecule itself, and it's a concentration level of the molecule itself, provided that it's done correctly. And the results that you need, like for CBD, you need a vast amount to have the results that they want and they're expecting, and you're not going to get that to the point. You're not going to get that with what they're putting out there currently, or what the proposed, what they're proposing to put out there over the counter. Yes, it is a good start, yes, it is a start, not a good start, but a start, and having some sort of access onto that's going to be an advantage. And yes, it might take a few years to help grow that avenue and see where that ends up. But from a streamlining access point and from that testing component, it's not effective for anything. Like, it's not even going to take your anxiety away at that point.
Yeah, like the other thing with CBD, it's pretty vital to actually have that consistency. You're using it on the daily. It's that compound effect that actually makes CBD work.
It's the entourage effect as well. So it helps to consume other cannabinoids to help push along CBD.
Like a full spectrum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, from an over-the-counter perspective, that's not going to happen.
Right. They don't even want us to smoke the whole plant.
That's right. But then again, they are giving us flour, which is happening. And to that advantage, you can use that flour in the machine if you're wanting to create something different. If you don't want to consume, or if you don't want it edibles.
I'll tell you. I was talking with my doctor, and they're a pretty large cannabis clinic, and they're not allowed to tell patients about using their vape res.
Yeah.
So you can't, like your AVB.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to tell them that you can still consume that, you can extract from that, you could just eat it even, you can't, they're not allowed to actually tell the patients because there's no consistency on that dosage.
Yeah.
But, if you think about it, for the patient's point of view, this is already expensive. This is a way they can get a little extra out of what they're spending. It'd be a big help, than using the magical butter machine or any other extract kind of method to push it on that. But that knowledge, it's just been forbidden. And why? Because apparently we need to be so regulated that a person can't actually regulate themselves.
Yeah, well, pre-vape herb is always been accessible after the fact, like you said, sort of thing, and people have quite a bit in abundance. And like you said, if they've the time and the temperatures that they've actually vaped on is predominantly for THC, and after that point, after most of the THC is eradicated, you've got your CBD that's coming through, or your CBD.
CBN comes through, and it's like, I find the vape res, it just puts me straight to sleep.
Yeah. And we get a lot of people also using the chips from the resin press, coming through, because there's a whole heap of CBD still left in that from that point. It's it's quite a few people use the chips to create either it's a topical or something similar to that effect. So, but that's part in, like, we've always tried to use as much of the herb as what we possibly can. Like there's recipes dating back hundreds of years where they were trying to do alcohol extractions with roots and so forth. And I think the Native Americans did something similar way back in the day with that style of thing, and it's still prevalent today. Like, people are still doing root extractions and getting different cannabinoids that, I don't know which ones are involved, but it's certainly not THC, CBD, or CBN. But they are getting a lot of different benefits from using the whole plant, including the roots, including the stalks, including the leaves.
Did you ever hear of the juices?
Yeah, juicing is definitely has its beneficial for anything THCA driven or CBDA driven is really good, and obviously we got to keep in mind that those are the two main molecules that they're extracting from a raw material from that point. Everything else is fairly knowledgeable because the concentration levels of what you get back is nil. Basically, like less than percentage. And that's but then again, those really small, minute molecules that are less than 1%
Those
trace amounts, they have incredible power. Like they have incredible abilities, and
the way they compound with the other.
Correct. The whole plant works for you.
It's almost like modern alchemy, the way we understand these cannabinoids.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it was 406 or 407 cannabinoids from last count or something similar. It's a huge amount that we don't know. But it's also, you need a huge amount of cannabis to extract small amounts of these trace elements that do so much. But it's also interesting to see that cannabinoids are found in so many other plants.
True.
And
terpenes.
And terpenes as well. Well, terpenes, that's where all the artificial terps are coming through, obviously, like all your limonene and pinene and those sort of things. And but then you've got the CBD and or not CBD, other cannabinoids themselves are getting extracted now from different plants, and that's led in from what cannabis has driven to these sort of markets. And it's made people find other things that could have some sort of medical value to that, and hopefully, the WHO, the World Health Organization, have recognised that.
Oh, you saw that news today.
We did, yeah. So it's quite beneficial, but whether
the international kind of law framework has kept the picture of cannabis legalization pretty bleak for a long time. The war on drugs, which has been global. So if there's a kind of de-escalation of that gradually, that would be great. That's
coming through, obviously, from the research that's been shown from around the world to say, hey, America's experimented, the US, the America's experimented heavily on this, and no one's going out extra, no one's no one's hurting themselves when they're on cannabis, or no one's doing anything different than what they expected. Like you said, no one's walking around seeing pink elephants, for instance, around after the consume. And again, it's just going severely against the propaganda that's been put out there for so many years before. And
a lot of people's lives are destroyed by the existing legal framework as well, the drug war. So
people's lives are getting destroyed now still in Australia.
I don't know. Are you familiar with the Craze Code Boys?
Yeah, Alec and I know each other.
Did you see his status last night? That was unbelievable.
Yeah. So they're unfortunately removing his security license because of a character. They're saying that his character has been questionable because of the antics that he's been involved with over the last few years. But it came down to him getting caught with cannabis whilst driving, but he had a full prescription for it. And for the security commissions to take away his security license for having a prescription, that's pretty weird. That's the legal point. Like it's
low as well, because it's still stigmatizing people who have tried to do the right thing.
Well, not only that, like that small indiscretion has created 4 or 5 people without a job now, 100%. Which from who works
plus
with these
contractors,
plus the contractors on top who are also working with the guys and so forth. And it is definitely unfortunate. We wish Alec all the best, and hopefully he gets through this. And but hopefully there's a class action against being pulled over in the first place for having a cannabis prescription. Like you're not intoxicated when you're having it, and that's what people don't realise. You're right. There is no impairment. There's no intoxication. There's no,
If you can prove it, then great. But we don't have these tests or rules or kind of.
You need to bring some sort of like.
We've got a zero tolerance compared to some other countries, and a friend of mine in the US, or actually in Colorado, she was one of the first that actually was done for intoxication of cannabis, and she went to court and she fought the fact that she was not intoxicated,
right.
and she could prove the fact that she wasn't intoxicated
right.
because she's been working in the industry for so long, and she worked at a dispensary, and she knew what she was doing, and she could explain everything, and she was able to get off the charge. But the thing is, though, she shouldn't have been charged anyway because she wasn't intoxicated. Like there was no side-by test that you could do. Like with alcohol, obviously they make you walk a line and all that sort of shit. In the US, they throw us on a breathalyzer and so forth. In Canada, they're going to the same sort of direction for a breathalyzer to see the concentration level of it, but that doesn't give you intoxication.
How are we going to test intoxication? Do you have them just start pumping jokes and seeing how hard you crack up?
Yeah, well, it's like the old frontline skit way back in the day where Russell Coit, I forget his name, had a bag of chips and it was pulling people up with a breathalyzer and said, "Oh, have you been consuming cannabis today, man? Oh, okay. Well, would you like a chip?" And, yeah. Out of the car, love. You've been done.
I'd be okay with that. That's a good test.
Yeah. It's an easy one to pass if you're smart. But yeah, but it just.
They'll have a few methods.
Yeah,
next time it'll be something different.
Yeah, I'm sure. But chocolate instead of chips or something. But that's to the point though that it's a fast. Like, as the old cliche, the stoners will stop at a stop sign and wait for it to turn green, and that's not exactly what happens, but essentially that's the naive reality. But they're not running red lights, they're not swerving on the road. If anything, they're more cautious.
Sure.
And that's something that should be tested.
I would say you have that more cautious aspect because the user generally will know that their impairment is slightly, like I would say it's like your reaction time probably a little lower, so you're just being more cautious about
I'd say if they did studies on that would be borne out, but at the same time if you compared it to something like benzodiazepines or alcohol, you'd see less of an impairment in reaction time, and you probably just, like Josip says, there'd be less of a recklessness or loss of inhibition on the road.
See, like I think about someone on a Valium. That's much scarier than someone on cannabis driving. When I've had a Valium, it's like, whoa, I'm like not giving a fuck, to be honest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, and Oxycontin, obviously, and any sort of harder medicines that could play to that as well. But you still got to keep in mind that you got to be a logical person. If you're feeling intoxicated in any way, don't drive. If you're feeling tired, you don't.
Too many people don't understand that, man. They just don't.
No, that's right. And don't get me wrong, I do a lot of driving myself, and we drive around the country and do a fair bit of work around in different places. And if you pull up when you're tired,
that's it.
Or if you've had too many smokes the night before, you wait a couple of hours and have a coffee. Yeah, it's just taking your time before you get to it. And but again, if you've had a big night before on cannabis, you shouldn't be done for intoxication 3 days after.
Yeah, this is the problem. Fundamentally, people have it in their systems for like a week or two.
Yeah, and if they're a heavy user, it's a lot longer.
Yeah, a month.
So that's the thing. It's and that just plays up to working towards the solution to say, hey, there needs to be a better system, and we're not going to solve that here between the three of us, but there definitely needs to be a better system in place going forward and monitoring. If it is an intoxication level, then hey, so be it, if that's what needs to be done. But there has to be showing a level of impairment per that intoxication.
For sure.
Like, put people to the test. Do an actual study of people who do regularly consume cannabis.
Yeah.
And,
how do you find a meaningful variable, rather than just they've got THC in their saliva?
Well, that's the thing. Like, if someone who doesn't smoke or consume edibles or whatever was to consume the same amount of edibles as what I would consume or what you guys would consume, like we said before,
be able to get into the car.
Yeah, they're not going to have a good time. But that's coming down to them saying, maybe I shouldn't fucking drive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it comes down to us as being responsible as well and fighting it. Every time that someone in the community unfortunately does get caught driving under the influence that they've had their medicine 2 or 3 days prior, then they need to fight it, and they need to explain the difference in intoxication, because
Sure.
they're no harm to anyone. It's just a residual molecule that's in your body, and the reason why it's in your body because your body requires it. Your body wants it. It's not an amphetamine that's pushed out, within 3 days or 2 days or a day. It's not coke. It's not any of those sort of foreign substances that have been refined and chemicalized. We're talking about something that you can produce, or your breast milk can be produced with cannabinoids.
Yeah,
We're
you
talking
have an endocannabinoid system.
exactly.
Time to start arresting mums.
Well, to that, so you do have the other side of things. You do have cannabinoids that take on opiates. You have opioid opioid receptors, and those opioid receptors, what makes all those other drugs work.
Sure.
But your body doesn't produce those types or any beneficial opioids from that point. Whereas, if you're a breastfeeding mother, you do produce cannabinoids.
Right.
And that's been shown. It's obviously non-psychoactive and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But the studies have been shown, from what I've read, that's that's what promotes sleep in the baby, or that's what promotes hunger in the baby, and that's what promotes these types of things that you need for early development. And
What I find really interesting about the whole entourage effects, endocannabinoid system research that's been done is that it kind of it has a similar kind of feature effects list as the function of SSRIs, for instance, or mood stabilizers or antipsychotics. They're doing a very similar thing, because the ECS doesn't just control one system. It's like a holistic up and down regulator of all these different systems. And so if you have an imbalance in one part or the other, it's this kind of artificial inducement of specific cannabinoids that can bring you back into a kind of homeostasis or closer to balance, which is often what is being attempted when you give somebody some pills to try and make them feel better.
Yeah, and unfortunately, traditionally, those pills are all artificially made chemicals, but it's for them to come up with the idea in the first place to jump on a compound that's made artificially, then we had to find it naturally first, from what I can understand.
Sure.
And
Had
cannabis
to be derived somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And cannabis can skip that whole process. If you can, get to the stage where you're just taking out CBN or CBG. As we said before, and could you imagine having a nice CBG tincture before you go to bed for sleep?
Sure.
The thing is, though, you don't take that in the morning and go for a drive. It's the same.
Different uses.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and it's the same ability, and the user's ability to that. But like anything, it can be abused, and it does get abused, and that's part of the reason why the government might be so tentative to push these sort of things through. But that said, though, you can go to Woolworths and OD. You can drink 7 litres of water in a day and die, or 8 litres a day and die, or whatever the statistics are. So there's common sense needs to take provision, and being an adult, you should be able to have the right to dictate what you want to do. And and honestly, Murphy's Law or Dawson's Law is going to sort
I
the rest
agree.
out.
People go and believe that bleach is a miracle cure. I mean, there's a certain level of knowability and know-how. You can't make everything illegal just because some people are going to abuse certain things.
No, that's right. It's and that's everything in moderation.
Yes.
That's
Except
all it is.
bleach. Don't have bleach.
Well, yeah, no, you can have bleach, just don't drink it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I did mean
That's how I make
drinking
my
bleach.
space rocks. I blow into the bleach.
It's that's but that's the thing though. Unfortunately what people do is like when like cocaine, for instance, the drastic amount of things that cocaine's cut with is phenomenal. And if you've ever watched a documentary on those sort of refined drugs, you probably never do any of those sort of things ever again if you have done them. Whereas with cannabis, it's a seed in the ground, then it's dried, and
It's an organic plant medicine.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that's just a refined difference. And
So it's frustrating with cocaine. If we actually treated cocaine how we should just be chewing on the leaves, getting a little energy kick, and going about our day. But we've taken it.
Yeah, we've
and
refined it.
effectively raped it, and let's take it, and then that's what's causing so many problems with everything we do.
Interesting that the contrast between human synthesized drugs, which can be great and have their benefits. Like one of my favorite compounds is LSD, for instance. Like Albert Hoffman, I think, is a genius.
Yeah.
But with that being said, there are a lot of compounds that have, high addictive potential that human beings have refined and synthesized and created. And in some ways, looking at like LSD versus mushrooms have been organically producing themselves in the ground through a mycelium network for the past, billions of years.
Yeah.
And so they have a long kind of history and a large kind of evolutionary and genetic potential. And I think that's a knowing, or a kind of like a sense of like that mushroom contains like a history that is much broader than human beings, and it has qualities and attributes that we haven't cut out or synthesized. It is what it is because it's evolved alongside and co-evolved with us.
Yeah, I think with psilocybin and the push, I'm not sure if you've seen the push for psilocybin in the States as well. That seems to be coming along quite nicely for that. It's phenomenal what psilocybin can do for one.
Is it? Yeah.
It's I know quite a few. Again, I do deal with the US guys a fair bit. I know quite a few veterans and who obviously gone to war and all sort of stuff in the States that quite regularly medicate themselves on psilocybin, and it works exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But then again, it's normally refined into a tablet, so it's
Sure.
grounded up and done, sort of that sort of direction. It's not picking it out and just taking it from the field, but it's working for them. And a lot more of these sort of things need to be explored and studied. Like, I think, from one of the Joe Rogan podcasts that, we've all probably listened to, I think he was saying that that's how one of the people that come on said, hey, this is how we believe that apes formed.
Oh, that was the Dennis McKenna.
Yeah.
That was a good
so
one.
taking mushrooms and psilocybin may have affected their brain to start thinking out, and
That's the theory. Yeah.
we ended up using tools. We ended up using rocks to smash shit, and the brains expanded, and that could have well have been from taking psilocybin back 100,000, 200, 300, 400,000 years ago.
Another interesting thing is that human beings could have taken the mushrooms that were more trippy and actually selected for them. Like, what I mean?
Well, you'd be like Murphy's Law or Dawson's Law. It'd be all trial and error. Like, you would see, one Homo sapien will pick up a mushroom and the other Homo sapiens probably look at him and see what happens to him. And if he's having a great time, they might go take it as well. But
Apparently,
if it
it's
kills
like
over,
visual acuity has a lot to do with it. Being able to see long distances.
Oh, okay.
So that you can, and I mean, this might be a physical thing, but there are also other dimensions to it, I assume, which are more about kind of the pre-civilizational, pre-industrial kind of mind, the hunter-gatherer or like tribal mind, which I think is a lot more archaic and had a lot more to do with like less of a like deeply rationalized symbology. It was like more mythic and mystical.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think that early humans actually experienced themselves more as spiritual beings, as kind of like beings with a deep and rich inner life. Oh, whoops. Just fucking did something there. But regardless, I think that there's a sense that, people have actually come from that space where, mystic experience, psychedelic experience was just an everyday part of life, potentially. And we've moved into a space where it's a specific experience that we get from this connection to our past through the mushroom.
Do you think that the Homo sapiens of the world and so forth worshipped these things that gave them a different effect from what they would be used to?
There might have been a ritualistic component, but I'm not sure what that would have been. You know what I mean? But I do believe that there would have been a deeply ritualistic component, and it would have had to do with, direct experience.
Well, we see so many cultures throughout the world who have consistently taken mushrooms throughout the end of time, like the Vikings and all that sort of stuff, and Norwegian populace and all that. They all these sort of places did, have notable history that they use these psychoactive substances, not only cannabis as well, but also mushrooms and all these things that are found in nature that are there. Like, there was that Chinese tomb or something that was 2,000 years old, and there was cannabis traces in what they perceived to be the world's first bong, way back, intact oldest bong basically from that point. So these nature has always had an effect on humanity and the
we've
world around.
co-evolved with nature. And the interesting thing is how human beings evolving today, we seem to be ever more, alienated or separate from these processes, but we're still evolving with them. We're still connected to them.
That could be the industrial era,
I think so.
From, probably 150 odd years ago to when technology has really taken a hold, and that's where the pharmacies now are starting to get these products that have been in history for so many years, and then they're compounding them, and like we were saying before, they synthesize these natural molecules, made them stronger, made them harder, made them dangerous. And our bodies weren't necessarily meant to consume things of that nature all the time.
Sure.
And that's where abuse comes, and that's where drug addiction comes from, because we're not used to consuming these things, and you can relate that back to the cannabis industry and hemp, more importantly, I guess. And the farmers used to feed hemp stalk and hemp products and hemp fibers and all that sort of shit to the cattle.
Yeah.
The cattle would consume that. You would consume the cattle's meat. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, or milk. And I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but there would have to be some transferable properties from consuming that severe amount of hemp to go through to their bodies, and then we'd consume it. Now, whether we were healthier 100 years ago compared to what we are now with our current technology, it's hard to say.
Life expectancy has obviously gone up. That seems to be the key indicator in a lot of things, but then it's like that's not really the case. It's like we've just adapted to knowing diseases and things a little better.
We're more educated around recognizing different things, and don't get me wrong, modern medicine most certainly has its place in
benefits.
Of course, but we're also reneging the fact that if we had a good diet and we've had eating these sort of products, or if the products that we're eating were eating these sort of products, and those sort of potential cannabinoids will transfer into the bodies of whatever that we're eating, sort of makes sense that if we went down that route, would 90% of the population still have a cannabinoid deficiency? And
probably not.
Yeah, exactly, because they might be getting these products from what nature's already provided that there's been put a stop to in the last 150 odd years.
Yeah.
Isn't it strange when you're in the cannabis space, you feel like you're in this like secret that's like just waiting to come to the world? Like,
well, in many ways it's part of the broader narrative of like the future is kind of rooted in the ground and rooted in nature and in organics. Like it has this essential quality of connection to our past.
Yeah, I definitely agree from that point, and most people in Australia, or I won't say most people, a lot of people in Australia have European heritage. From that point, and cannabis throughout Europe is synonymous. It always has been. It always probably will be. And
I mean, how did they get here? This place was supposed to be a hemp colony for all of the ships for the British Empire, supposedly, according to some people. Yeah,
well, that's. We obviously all come to Australia for, I think it was mainly the gold rush.
This was, the first settlers, I suppose, who had brought a bunch of, I guess hemp plants, actual sativa plants, because they went to India and they attempted to basically set up a colony for hemp production. The British Empire did. And they found that their sativa plants didn't grow as well as the indicas. The indicas that were pre-existing in India weren't as good for, I guess, ship production to actually create materials out of. So they went to Australia, put in their sativa plants, and for the first 150 years of our country and colony existing under European settlement, we had hemp plants everywhere. We were massive hemp producers. We had cannabis salves, and we had different kinds of tinctures, and we had flowers that were being produced for people and consumed.
So I think that it's, as we were saying before, the byproducts of those productions were fed to cattle and fed to the livestock fed to those sorts of things. And
that's very true.
And we consume those animals. It's whatever was a byproduct that they couldn't use from the textiles of making sails or printing paper or any of those sorts of things were fed to the animals, and we consumed that. And so it's that whole ecosystem of how things sort of work. It's But we've stopped that. We've gone to trees instead of hemp for these sorts of reductions, and we've gone to cotton and so forth instead, and we've gone to different types of things. Whereas hemp itself solves all of those products, all of those issues.
It provides new solutions. It does.
Oh, for sure. Or even just purely on the cotton industry alone. I think the cotton industry uses
in Australia. Goodness.
I think cotton uses 30 or 40% of the world's pesticides.
The water is the crazy thing to me.
Yeah.
Like, because cotton just takes and takes and takes from the land, never gives anything back.
No. Whereas cannabis replenishes soil, it gives back to it. You can actually get subsidies from the government now for planting hemp on farms.
That's right. And if it happened more in, the tablelands in New South Wales and the Murray-Darling Basin, for instance, the water table would rise significantly. The land would be less solidified.
Yep.
There would just be a better quality in the environment, even if you did have the same kind of industrial monocultural production of hemp versus cotton, which is insane because monocultures aren't even that good for the environment. But then you look at how bad cotton is and it just goes to show.
Yeah, and anything that cotton can do, hemp can do better.
Pretty much.
Like there's processes out now that you can get a hemp stalk and turn it into a fiber extremely similar to cotton. Like I've held both of cotton and the fiber, and it's very, very, very difficult to tell the difference. And that could easily be used to think, but unfortunately right now it's expensive. Like we're saying on the medical side of things, it's going to be a concentrated populace. So as these sort of processes get more recognised and more companies or more hemp farms are going towards these types of materials and this type of process, things will get cheaper because you can have more on the marketplace.
Couldn't agree more. There'll be a sense of the whole priority shift and efficiency logistics chain will shift to meet demand.
Yeah, for sure.
And with hemp saving the world, I think we might end it there.
Yeah,
that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, well, hemp will save the world, and let's go through that. And I think cannabis should save the world as well. But Australia needs to get on board.
Yep, that's it. Thanks for coming on, Nathan.
No, thanks for having me, guys.
And,
much appreciated.
Thanks for pushing our scene forward. Thanks for being part of everything.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. Cheers.
Catch you later, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.